Our scripture reading this morning is taken from the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. King Solomon wrote 3 books of the Bible, the Proverbs, the Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes. He wrote these books at different stages of his life. And so Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and we'll read verse 1 and then verses 11 to 14. So Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and beginning at verse 1. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. And then he goes on to outline various experiences and opportunities in life over the next 7 verses. Then we pick up his thought again in verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. What is the answer to this riddle? I am free, but I'm priceless. You can't own me, but you can use me. You can't keep me, but you can spend me. Once you've lost me, you can never get me back. The answer is time. And that demonstrates the value of time, something that was brought home very clearly by that DVD clip that was shown a little bit earlier. Imagine this scenario. Imagine that $1,440 were deposited in your bank account at the start of every day. Then the terms and the conditions of that arrangement were this: that you couldn't carry over any of that amount to the next day. And any that you didn't use, by the end of the day, you would lose it. Now, of course, you would have every incentive to spend every dollar. Well, in actual fact, something like that happens every day to each one of us. The bank of time gives us a fresh deposit every day. A deposit of 1,440 minutes every day. We're credited with that amount at the start of each day. And what we don't use, we lose. We can't return to the past. We can't draw upon the future. We live each day on present deposits. You see, time is an essential, fundamental building block of life, the experience of life. We're constantly reminded of that. Our lives are governed by time. The American inventor Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not squander time, for it is the stuff life is made of." Now, we can measure time, but it's actually very difficult to define. For example, we have this definition in Webster's dictionary. Time is a non-spatial continuum in which events occur in apparently irreversible succession from the past through the present to the future. Now, when you actually work through that definition, if you try to understand all the jargon in it, it's basically saying that time marches on. So even this definition just explains what time does. It doesn't actually explain what time is. And time is actually very difficult to define. Sometimes it seems to go very fast. Sometimes it appears to go very slow. And yet, in actual fact, it's going at the same rate. And one important thing about time and life is that it doesn't have a rewind button. We can't go back. Time. It's arguably our most valuable talent. And it comes in equal amounts to every one of us. None of us can say that we have more time than anyone else. We all get 24 hours a day. It's all the same. And every experience that we enjoy happens while the clock ticks. Heartbreak and happiness, delight and disappointment, success and setback, all happens through the passing of time. And the quality and the joy and the impact of our lives will be determined by our use of time. This morning I want to talk about the stewardship of time, arguably our most precious talent. And I want to do so by using the acronym of time itself, taking each letter and how each letter can stand for how we should relate to this talent of time. T. T stands for treasure. We should treasure the talent of time. As I've said, time is arguably our most precious resource. You've probably heard the saying that time is money. Well, in actual fact, time is probably more valuable than money. You see, time is perishable and cannot be replaced. It's possible to earn more money, though it requires a bit of effort to do so. But you can actually earn more time. It's possible to save money, but you can't actually save time, though we often delude ourselves that we can. Time is actually more valuable than money. Consider this quotation, this insight from the Christian author and pastor A.W. Tozer. He said this on one occasion: "Time is a resource that is non-renewable and non-transferable. You cannot store it, slow it up, hold it up. You can't hoard it or save it for a rainy day. When it's lost, it is unrecoverable. When you kill time, remember that it has no resurrection." We need to treasure time. And if you're in any doubt about how precious time is, consider the words of this reading. To realize the value of 1 year, ask a student who has failed a final exam. To realize the value of 1 month, ask the parents of a premature baby. To realize the value of 1 week, ask an editor of a weekly newspaper. To realize the value of 1 hour, ask 2 lovers waiting to meet each other. To realize the value of 1 minute, ask someone who has missed a train or bus or plane. To realize the value of 1 second, ask someone who has survived an accident. To realize the value of 1 millisecond, ask someone who won a silver medal at the Olympics. The value of time. Time is precious. And that's a thought that often comes across in the Psalms. For example, Psalm 39 and verse 4. And there the psalmist cries out to God, Psalm 39 and verse 4, "Show me, Lord, my life's end, and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting life is." And then we have particularly powerful words in Psalm 90. There the psalmist contrasts the eternity of God with the finiteness, the mortality of man. And we have this cry in Psalm 90 and verse 12. "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And so we need to be wise in our use of time. We need to be careful and thoughtful in the way that we use this talent. And that's true of every stage of life, as expressed by this poem. When as a child I laughed and wept, time crept. When as a youth I dreamed and talked, time walked. When I became a full-grown man, time ran. And later, as I older grew, time flew. Soon I shall find, when traveling on, time gone. The precious nature of time, how we need to treasure the talent of time. And it's so important that we value it every day. From a physical point of view, we can only live in the present. But it's so important that we live on all levels in the present, to enjoy life daily. Every day is a gift from God. As someone has put it, yesterday is a cancelled check, tomorrow is a promissory note, today is the only cash you have. Spend it wisely. Or you may have heard it put another way, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. That's why we call it the present. Enjoy each day. It's a treasure, it's a gift from God. And how people who have had everything materially recognize that. One of the greatest monarchs in British history was Elizabeth I. She was England's Gloriana. In her reign of almost 45 years, England became a major European power, and the foundations were laid for the worldwide influence of England in the centuries to come. She was a great queen, but her latter days were marred by sickness and bouts of depression. And on the morning that she died, she was frantically clinging to life, and she declared, "I would give all my possessions for a moment of time." Time is precious. And so the challenge to each one of us is to treasure the talent of time, to savor and experience each day as a gift from God. Now, as I've said, time cannot be saved, but it can be invested. And that brings me to the letter I. I stands for investment. We are to invest our time. Now, again, time is a limited resource. You take a week, for example. A week comprises 168 hours. Now, most of us will spend over 50 of those hours sleeping. For those of us who work, we probably will spend an equivalent amount, 50 hours, in work or traveling to and from work. I'm sure that's often the case here in Sydney. And then, of course, you need to spend about, maybe 20 to 25 hours eating, matters of personal hygiene, things like that. And so at the end of it all, you're probably left with something like 30 to 40 discretionary hours each week. And how you and I spend those 30 to 40 hours will tell us a lot about our stewardship, about what's really important in our lives. How many of those hours do we devote to God and His work? How many of those hours do we give towards the welfare, the service of our loved ones? How many of those hours do we devote to our goals, to what's really important to us in life? How do we invest our time? And when it comes to the investment of our time, it's critical that we know what's really important, what really counts. Jesus said many profound things in his Sermon on the Mount. And one example of that is found in Matthew chapter 6 and verses 33 and 34. Matthew 6 and verse 33, Jesus said, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." Seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness. It's important to know what really matters. And let me share with you two things I think that really matter. You know, there's not many things that we'll be able to take with us into the kingdom of heaven, but one of them will be our relationships, our friendships. How important that we invest our time in our relationships, especially with our loved ones. The late evangelist Billy Graham once said, "Time is the capital that God has given us to invest. People are the stocks in which we are to invest our time." Time with family, involvement in the lives of others, notably children. You know, the various stages that children go through come and go very quickly. And we can't go back to those stages once they've gone. It's important that we're there at that time to experience it, to enjoy it. And sometimes that will mean making choices. It will mean saying a very small but significant word. No. No, I can't do that. I would like to, but no. This is where I want to invest my time and my energy. Barbara Bush, who died recently, once said this: "At the end of your life, you will never regret not having passed one more test, not winning one more verdict, or closing one more deal. You will regret time not spent with a spouse, a friend, a child, or a parent." How important that we invest our time in friendships, in people, because ultimately that's what really matters when it comes to life. The other thing in which we do well to invest our time is in a purpose, in a goal, in a cause. A number of years ago, a study was carried out which involved 50 people over the age of 95. And these people were asked just one question: if you had your life to live over again, what would you do differently? Now, that's a really good question. And so here you had 50 people with a combined total of almost 5,000 years of the experience of life. And one of the most popular answers was this: if I had my life to live over again, I would invest it in a cause that would outlive me. You know, what a great answer. If I had my life to live over again, I would invest my life in a cause that would outlive me. And when it comes to a noble cause, when it comes to an eternal cause, there is no cause like the proclamation of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that is a cause in which you and I can be involved. That is a cause to which you and I can give our loyalty and our time and our allegiance. You know, the Apostle Paul from a prison cell could write, "For to me to live is Christ." And from a dark Roman dungeon, as he anticipated death, he could write, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith." Here was someone who had invested his time wisely. You see, we'll not have enough time for everything, but we will have enough time for the important things, for the things that really matter. That's where investment comes in. And closely related to investment of time is management of time. M stands for management. We need to manage our time. On one occasion, a lecturer was conducting a time management seminar for some company executives. And he produced this clear, open-mouthed, large jar. He presented it at the front of the class, and he proceeded to put large rocks into this jar. And after he had filled it, he said to the class, is the jar full? And And everyone nodded yes. Then he proceeded to put some little pebbles and grit into the jar. And again he asked the question, is the jar full? And people said yes. And then he proceeded to pour some sand into the jar. And again he asked the question, is the jar full? And people were a bit more reluctant to give an answer. And then he actually poured some water into the jar. And then he asked the class, what is the point of this illustration? What is the point I'm trying to get across? And one executive put up his hand and said, it just shows you that no matter how busy you are, you can fit more into your schedule. And the lecturer said, no, wrong answer. You've missed the point. The important point is that if you don't put the rocks in first, there won't be any room for the rocks. And the rocks stand for what's important. The rocks stand for your priorities in life. What are your rocks? What are mine? The cause of God? The welfare of your family? The advance of God's kingdom? Time management is a subject in itself. It's become almost an industry, I think. And Stephen Covey, the writer of the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has this to say about time management. He wrote this: time management is a misleading concept. You can't really manage time. You can't delay it, speed it up, save it, or lose it. No matter what you do, time keeps moving forward at the same rate. The challenge is not to manage time, but to manage ourselves. That's the issue. How we manage ourselves. And that concept is brought out in Paul's letter to the Ephesians. In one translation, it talks about redeeming the time. Ephesians chapter 5 and verses 15 and 16. Ephesians 5 and verses 15 and 16. And Paul wrote to the Ephesians 5 and verse 15, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Making the most of every opportunity, managing time, redeeming time, seeing the possibilities, seizing the opportunities. And I would like to suggest 3 P's, as it were, that can help us to do that. The first P is purpose. A group called Alabama brought out a song a number of years ago. The refrain went like this: I'm in a hurry to get things done. I rush and rush until life's no fun. All I've really got to do is live and die, but I'm in a hurry and I don't know why. And that probably sums up the lives of many people. No purpose. It's important to have a purpose. And the biblical view of our purpose in life is to live in such a way that God is glorified and that we enjoy the presence of God. And once we've established that purpose, then we come to priorities. And a priority is essentially this: working out what is more important and working out what is less important. That's a priority. And again, we come back to the words of Jesus: seek ye first the kingdom of God. A priority is saying yes to what really matters, what really counts. So you have a purpose, you have priorities, and then planning. And planning is extremely important. As someone has said, he who fails to plan, plans to fail. And so it's good to have a daily plan, a weekly schedule, to ask questions like, what are the most important things I need to do today, this week? And maybe to rank them in order of importance. Let a daily list guide each day, or time like a ghost will slip away. the importance of planning. One of the most successful soap operas ever is the American show The Days of Our Lives. I've never watched an episode, so I don't have any confessions to make here. But that soap opera has been running for over 50 years. It's recorded over 13,000 episodes. And each episode begins with an hourglass and the voiceover. Like sands through an hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Now, it may be a soap opera, but that's actually true. And our lives will slip away like sand through an hourglass if we don't plan. The importance of planning. And so when it comes to the management of time, there are two principles at work. Number one, time is a gift from God that must be managed wisely. And number two, if you don't manage your time, someone else will manage it for you. So we need to manage your time. And then we come to E. E stands for enjoyment. Enjoy time. Yes, to be a steward of time is an awesome responsibility. But we are not to view this stewardship as a burden, but as a blessing. We're not to look upon time as an enemy, but as a friend. Time is a wonderful talent from God. It's a gift to enjoy, and we're to enjoy it. Let us not fall into the trap of John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. At one stage in his experience, he had constructed an elaborate grid in which he recorded his daily activities hour by hour. He recorded all the promises and resolutions that he had either kept or broken. And he gave himself a score of 1 to 10 of how devoted he was. Now, one can admire his discipline, but at that stage of his life, he had no assurance, he had no joy, he had no peace with God, because he did not view time as a friend, something to enjoy. Let us rather follow the example of Jesus, who is our example in all things. Jesus was engaged in the greatest mission that any person has ever engaged in, the salvation of the human race. And he had only very limited time to do that. His public ministry lasted about 3.5 years. And yet when you read the Gospels, you never get the sense that Jesus was in a hurry. He had time for children. He had time for friends. He appreciated nature. He enjoyed a good laugh. He had his quiet times with his Father. For Jesus, time was a friend. He enjoyed time. And we're to enjoy time as well. There needs to be rest as part of our enjoyment of time. The Bible doesn't say, if you hurry, you will catch up with God. Rather, it says, be still and know that I am God. The Bible doesn't say, Jesus didn't say, come to me and I will work you to the bone. He said to us, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We need to set aside time to rest. That's why we're so blessed to have the Sabbath. But rest is a very important part of our lives. You know, in games like basketball, American football, they have timeouts where the clock is stopped. Now, we can't stop the clock, but we can have timeouts in the sense that we can rest and enjoy time and reflect on the lives that we have. And it's important also to have time for recreation, to create memories, to have a margin in our lives. And if we do that, we will enjoy better health, better relationships, and be more useful in our respective areas of ministry. We are to enjoy time. And so in conclusion, time is our most precious and yet perishable possession. Every day that we live is a gift from God. Life between the bookends of birth and death is a series of opportunities, of openings where God can work in and through us for his honor and glory, and for our blessing as well. The boundaries of life, birth and death. You see that in every obituary. The date of a person's birth, the date of a person's death. And in between those two dates is a dash. And that dash is actually the most important of all, because that dash represents a life. And I want to close with a couple of verses from this poem entitled, "How Do You Live Your Dash?" I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone, from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth. And now only those who love her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love, and how we spend our dash. How are you spending your dash? In response to this subject of the stewardship of time, I'd just like to invite you to reflect. I'd like you just to have the opportunity to spend a little time, not on your own, but with a fellow member of this congregation. I'd like us to get together in twos and just spend a little time praying for each other. To pray, perhaps you might just share what you would like your partner to pray for in your life, but to pray. Just to treasure that time together, to manage it, to enjoy it, to pray for one another. And then we'll also respond in praise to our eternal God and Redeemer and the Holy Spirit. So I invite you now just to get together in twos, to chat briefly, to pray for each other.
Let's stand and let's sing "There Is a Redeemer," the final song for the day. There is a Redeemer, Jesus, God's own Son, precious Lamb of God, Messiah, Holy One. Jesus, my Redeemer, name above all names, precious Lamb of God, Messiah, all for sinners slain. us your Son, and leading your Spirit till your work on earth is done. And when I stand in glory, when I stand in glory, I will see his face, and there I'll serve my King forever in that holy place. Thank you, oh my Father, for giving us your Son and leading your Spirit till the work on earth is done. Thank you, oh my Father.
And now may the Lord keep you from all harm. May he watch over your life. May the Lord watch over your coming and going from this day forth, both now and forevermore, in Jesus' name.